Okay. It was a bit intense the morning, a lot of things, but it was mostly recap, right? So let's see. Let's try and do something that is quite similar to what we have done so far. So let me show you what we will try to do. So we want to create this app, coffee app. You see, again, it's the same. It has a view. It's very similar to the one you have in your portfolio. It has a view where you add some information, a type of coffee, the price, and a URL for the image. And then when you click add coffee, it adds the projects. So let me refresh it. So it first adds the projects here in a grid format. It adds these coffees in a grid format. And then when you click on one, it shows next to it in a more like a featured section way. Yeah, so in this case, it will show next to it. In your portfolio, we were saying on the top, of course, the positioning it's nothing to do with JavaScript, so you can do that later. So how do we do this? Let's start if we wanted to start the project from the very beginning, how we would do that. Remember how we start the view, quick start, create an app. We want to start our project from 0. So first of all, what we do is npm init view latest. And I'm going to go to desktop. And it will ask me for some project name, coffee, what do I call it? Coffee, let's say, call it coffee, package name. And then I will just do like a no to everything. And this created a folder called coffee. If I check it here, it's this one that had created. So first I need to change directory to this coffee folder. That has the basic structure, but you see that there is no node modules folder in here. And then I need to do npm install so that it installs all the information that it needs to run all the extra packages that the package.json says that this project needs. This will take some time at the beginning. And I will open it then on the VS Code to see it. Okay. Okay, so I have it here. And I have my index HTML that has nothing, as we were saying, it just has this div with ID app. And then on the source folder, the main.js, again, it just takes the create app, the app, and it mounts the app to the ID app. It also gets a CSS file. We could import CSS like this. We are doing it, normally we're doing it in each component has its own CSS, but if we want, we could have some general CSS for the whole app and we could load it as a normal CSS file that it's here on the assets part. But I'm not going to be using this, so I'm going to remove it. And I'm going to remove the assets folder as well. Okay, and then on the app view here, it loads something. It's just this the basic template that it has like welcome and something. I will remove all these components, the hello world and everything. I will leave it empty. Script, template, and style. we put the template on top. I don't know why. And maybe in the newer versions now the template is. So it's just a very empty template for the view. And let me just copy some basic things so that I don't have to write everything. And so for my app view, I just need the basic navigation with the two buttons, same as we had with the portfolio button for the add coffee and the button for the choose coffee, these two buttons. And then I need title, and then I will be loading here my templates. Right now, nothing is loading, right? No templates, anything, just this very basic structure. Let me run it so that we also see it. Remember that in order to run it, we run npm run dev, and then it opens at some port, and right now it just looks like that. The buttons and the title. And so when we start with the script on the view, we just export default, and we declare how this component is going to be called. So now I'm on my app component. So this is the app component. And we will be declaring which components it's going to be using inside an object, and also some data that it's a function that return an object. Script, what is this here? Let me remove this here. And so, yes, we have no data and no components for now. So I want to create a very simple structure for starters. So the tree that I'm going to be created will be something like this, a coffee form and a coffee view. And at the beginning, it will be as we have it in our application, that is just the form and the view, the same as we had in our projects. But later, I also want to make this a bit more complex. So to have like two subcomponents as well here, so that we see a bit of a tree. So on the coffee view, the part that it shows the grid, it's also going to be a component on its own, and the part that it shows the feature, it's also going to be a component on its own. So I will try to create something like this, and for this I will be needing these two components for start, the same as we had in our. So let me remove the components that it has here. All these, I need these components, the ones that come with the app. Okay, so I'm going to be needing the coffee view and the admin view component. So I'm going here and I'm going to create the coffee view component and the coffee form, let's say, where the form is going to be. This is a view component. So again, it has the same syntaxes, a template, and a script. And how is it style? Some of these are automatically put when I will try to simplify it. Export default. Okay, so again, I don't want to waste time, like to just type the form. I'm going to be passing the template. I'm going to pass it here on the chat in case you want to copy it and try something. So this is the form template that I'm going to be using. Right now here, it's just a simple HTML form. So there is no view things here. It's just a form that has 3 input fields, the text, the price, and the URL, and the button, a submit button for the form, right? And so my coffee form, the component that will be getting the form, is just this component with the form. And I'm going to set here that the name of this component is coffee form. So I'm going to be exporting it like this. So for the moment, I don't need to set anything else. So this component I'm exporting with the coffee form. And so in the app view, when we want to use components, first thing that we do is that we import these components, not in the default, outside the export default. So in here, import coffee form from components of form. So first I'm saying which component, where I'm going to be finding the component. So I set up the root, and then remember inside here, I need to set that I'm going to be using these components. And now I could actually like add it in my template, in the app template. So I could add the coffee form component here. Either like this or in the recommended format, that is to transform it like this in this kebab case. So if we do these steps, we see that the component, this form component, is also loaded, because right now it always loads. I don't have any if, I don't have any conditional rendering here, so I just simply created a component and loaded in the app. Okay, so I have it here under my styling, under my title. I have this coffee component, and this is the form. So let's try to first do this part. So we have the form, we want to get some data, and we want to send it up to the parent. So the parent will have some kind of all coffees already. We want to fill with the data that we will be getting from the form. Okay, so the coffee form will be getting some data. And how do we send data to the parent? If I get some data from the form, how can I send them back up to the app, to the parent?
With an emit?
Yes, so we should create some kind of a method that emits and gets so that the parent will hear this. So first of all, we have these inputs, but before capturing everything, remember, how do I bind data? So again, here, this component will also have its own data. And the data that we want this component to manipulate is this 3 from the form. So it will manipulate name of the coffee, that it's, now it's an empty string. The price that I could maybe set 0 to start, and the image URL that it's also an empty. So this component is a form, and it needs to manipulate these 3 pieces of information from the input of the user. How do I bind this with this? The form input, which
login.
with VModel. So VModel, and I set these two names. So the first one, that is the name of the type, the name of the coffee, it's going to be linked to this data piece. Then the second, again with the VModel, I'm going to link it with the price. And the third one, I'm going to link it with the input URL. So now I need to like create this at click or on submit or something. So when the button is clicked, I need to capture this data, create an object, and create the emit so that the parent can hear it. In the form, I can add the submit or the event, let's say, of the form on the button, like a click event, or I can add it to the form element as a submit event. So there are two ways of doing it. We could say like at click, and when the button is clicked, then a method is called. So we could call handle submit here when the button is clicked. Or we could add it on the form. And on the form, we normally use the submitted. So on submit, we could also call like the handle submit method. One of the two. We don't need to add both of them. So we could either add it on the button as a click event, or we can add it on the form as a submit event, because the button is of type submit and will create a submission of the form, but then the form is submitted. And remember how when we were dealing with forms, we need to prevent the default behavior, which is to send the data somewhere else and reset the form and reload the form and everything. We did this in the DOM manipulation. This still is valid here. So when we work with forms, we need to prevent the default behavior. So we can do it in two ways. We can have a method. So inside our methods, in the handle submit method, we can say event and prevent default, same as we were doing when we were doing with manipulation. So pass the event here and say event prevent default like this inside the method that is called from the form. Or we could do it with a shortcut that we can put in here prevent, the word prevent, and it will directly also prevent the default behavior. So both ways work. This is shorter, so normally we go with this way. So when we do a submit event, we can do the dot prevent to prevent the default behavior. And then we don't need to do this. And so when the form will be submitted, the handle submit needs to do two things: get this information from the inputs. So get the name, price, and image URL from the data that the user have entered, create an object, and emit an event so that the parent can hear it, same as we were doing before. So let's create new coffee object that will bind the name of the coffee with this dot name, price with this price, and image URL with this dot image URL. These names could be different, right? So we have to have the same name here and here. This is the names of the parameters of the data that we have inside this component. And this is just an object we create with some data, and we set it to these variables, but it doesn't have to have the same name. So I could call this something else. So I could call this image, and the image will be getting the information from this field, from the image. Okay, but I'm going to call them the same. And also it's a good idea, as we said, to add some kind of ID that we will be increasing so that each object has its own unique ID. And I'm going to set this ID as well here initially to a 0. And I could increase it. Each object, so starts with 0, but the first object will have an ID 1, and then each object will have subsequently, the ID will be increasing for each new object I'm creating. So each new coffee I'm going to be inputting. So I'm creating this object, and now I need to send this information to the parent. And for this, use the emit. And in the emit, the first thing that we say is we describe how we call this event that we will be emitting. So add new coffee, let's say, and then the information that we pass to this. So we will be passing the new coffee object as a parameter. Right, so our form will be getting this, and we will be emitting this to the parent. And that's it, basically, for our form. It doesn't need to do anything else. It just captures some information and sends it to the parent. Then we can do some styling if we want, but the only thing that we want to do is this. And also we can reset the form so that it's empty the next time that we get in. So this dot name equal to an empty string again, and this dot image URL so we could reset the form. Okay, after finishing this, and so let's try to get this on the app and console log, and try to get this event, get the object, and console log it in the app, so that we know that we have captured it correctly and we got it in the app. So in the app, we have this component. We need to set to this component that this component will be emitting this event. So we need to define here that this component we will be emitting and add new coffee event, the same name that we have here, add new coffee. So I'm declaring in the app that this event, it will be emitting, this component will be emitting this event. And when this happens, I'm going to be calling the add coffee function method of this component. Okay, so I'm going right here, and on the methods, methods, I'm creating this add coffee method. And for now, and as a argument, this add coffee method takes this object that I'm emitting from the form. So it will be taking like this new coffee object. And for now, I will just console log coffee.name so that I see that I get this information correctly. Or I could also log all pieces of the name, the ID, the URL. Let me see if I just console log coffee, if I will set all objects. Because sometimes on the browser it just throws object. Okay, so I have my app, my root component. It has some buttons, and it loads this coffee component that it's a form where we add the input. This coffee form component creates, gets the information from the inputs here, the name, the price, and the URL image of the coffee. And then when I click the submit button, submit event is happening that calls the handle submit method. The handle submit method, then it's here, it creates a new object that is being passed to the parent by emitting a new custom event that is called add new coffee. So this component emits this event. This information is passed to the parent. And then when this happens, so when this add new coffee event is is done, is emitted. The parent then calls this add coffee method. That what it does, it should be adding this basically to this array that we have, same as we did before, right? But for now, just let's console log it. So remember that we also have this Vue add-on here on Chrome that shows, so it shows our components. So the app component, and it shows which data the app component has. That now, right now the app component has this all coffees data, that it's an array, that it's empty. And the coffee form, it's also showing that it has this data, that there is also an event that we have created, that it's a add new coffee event, that it's bound to this method on the app. And so it has some information. It's useful to check this. Let's see what happens if I'm going to add some coffee here, and then maybe some image URL again. No, sorry, click copy image address. So I see on the console log that this coffee is created with an ID 1, the name that I passed, the price that I passed, and the image URL. And I can also see on the coffee form, you don't see this. We just see that the ID is now 1 because we have increased it, and now the ID is 1. But then we have reset this field, so now it just shows again the empty fields. And on the app, this has not been modified because yet I have not pushed this in this array. Okay, so I get my data correctly, and now what I do is just push it also to my all copies array, push this new thing here, and then I will have it stored in this array. Let's add a bit of styling to make this a bit better. So again, for the buttons, we can add some conditional classes so that they show, let me see some. So this, for example, the coffee form, it should show, we could do again with the VIF in order to show it only if the, let's say, cafe view is not true, and have some kind of view. If I want to show it, and then when we have another component that we will create now, like the coffee view component that we will create, it will be the VL, same as we had in our project, right? So that it shows one or the other details. And so this button makes cafe view false if we click the add coffee, so it will show the form, or it makes cafe view to true if we want to just see the coffees. So this coffee form, it will just show if the cafe view is not true. So if I click on the other one, okay, it's not showing. Of course, this component yet is not created and it's not loaded, so it probably gives some error because it doesn't find this. Let's try again also the navigation to do it a bit better. I'm going to copy some styles here. The buttons. I have not loaded the bootstrap. Okay, so if I need to use because now I'm using this button of the bootstrap warning and everything, so I need to to load Bootstrap. And for this, remember that we go and we copy the CDN link. This is the easiest way of using Bootstrap. Include via CDN. So we just copy this CDN link. And to load Bootstrap, you need to go to the index.html and you load it right here somewhere on the head part. So now my buttons are like this because I have set them to use the button classes of the Bootstrap, the warning class, I think it was. Yes, the button warning. And I can change this to also be conditional, same as we did with the module, so that it just shows red, but I am not going to do this now here. Okay, and so let's try to create this other component then, the coffee view component, where we will be showing our coffees. Again, we have a template, we have a script, and I will copy mine. And the style, the three parts.
Anna?
Yes.
Can I ask you something?
Mm-hmm.
We are always using the single file component. Is it usually like this now, like in the wild? Because, for example, in the Vue Mastery, they didn't use it. So for example, for me now it's a bit difficult to understand the other, I don't know, the more classic way, because I think as I understood well, the single file component is like a new thing. So I wanted to know if you know in reality job places what is used usually.
I think this is the way of using it. Yes, this, with the single file components. So it depends on the versions that they have. I don't know the Vue Mastery course, if it was updated for the Vue 3 or it was with the Vue 2. So there are some changes in the 2.
It was with the Vue 3, that's why I don't know, maybe they didn't use the single file component to, I don't know, in order for us to understand how is it working, but they didn't use it and it was Vue 3.
I need to check what they use in the Vue Mastery to see what they were explaining. But this is a common way with this format, with the single file component. So I don't know, Joy, also, I think you are working with Vue more like in a more job.
Yeah, definitely single file components. And I think, Tatiana, you're right with your assumption that it's probably for simplification just to have all the components in one file. It's easier than importing and sharing across files.
But the correct way, the common way is to use it like this, right?
Yeah, at work it's like this.
Okay, so for the coffee view, then we want to have, let's see, first of course, when we create a component, we define its name. And so this will be our coffee view component, which is the way we will import it. Then it may have some data, and maybe we'll have some methods. So you could set these things up here. Normally we start from data where you don't know where to start from with a component. You start with which data it will be getting, which data it will be dealing with. So this coffee view, we'll also know that we'll be getting some props from, because it's what we want to show here. It's what we want to show on the coffees. And so we'll be getting some props from the app, and these all coffees will be passing as props. So one thing that we should set to the coffee view for sure, it's the props that it will be getting. but let's first set it here. So the coffee view will be getting the all coffees array as prop. So I'm binding this and binding it with this array that I have created here in my data. And so I need to define as well here on props that I'm going to be expect and all copies prop that it's going to be of type array. And then I can decide how to show it. So here I'm missing a comma. So I can show it in a grid format. I can have an H1. I can have, so as I was saying, it's good that we try to involve everything in one common div so that we have one root element per component. And then in here, let's say I want to have some title that says your favorite. Then maybe I'm going to create two sections, because remember what I showed you, the project that we want is what we want to have one section that is going to be our grid. So I'm going to have one section that is maybe my grid. And then on next to it, I'm going to have another section that is going to be the featured. Sorry. Okay, and so inside the grid, we need to render, we need to show everything that we get from the all coffees array. And remember how we did this? We used the V4 whenever we have an array and we want to loop over it to create items in a more automatic way. We just loop through them, and so we could have some div with the V4. And for each coffee of our all coffees array, we could have, and of course I need to also use some key. Remember that we need to use some key that can be the coffee ID that we have created. And so for each coffee, I want to show the image. And the source of the image, I'm going to be binding it to this variable I have, that is the coffee image URL. So for this first part, the left part, it's going to be a grid that it's going to go through the array with a for loop, and it's going to be showing all the images of this. So let's see how we see it on the, see where we are. We did not import the component. Sure. So here we are just importing the coffee form, but in order to use this component, so I started using it, but before I import it. So the correct way is import the component. So I'm importing it here. Then define it here in the components list. And then use it. Okay. So that we avoid errors. I'm importing the component from where I want to import it. I did something here. I define it in my component sections that I'm going to be using that, and then I add it somewhere in my template. So now when I say choose your cup, of course, pick your favorite, but I don't have any data here yet. So let's add some information. Let me see what it says. Data should return an object. Yes, this one. This latte or and an image URL. Let me see what is missing. Cannot read properties of undefined rating all copies. let's see where our error is. View 35.
I think there's a typo with this. There should be this all coffees push.
Ah, yes, correct. Nice. These are coffees and push. Okay. So let's try that. Okay, so I console logged it, it's added, and it shows here. And I could add some other one. Espresso 230, and then some image, some espresso image. Let's take this one. 2.3. I just accept. I need to set it so that it accepts also. But for now, images at least they appear here. And I can, of course, modify again the styling. Let's add some styling to have it on the coffee view, to have my grid. So I have defined that this is a grid. Grid class display grid. I want to let me see that I don't forget anything. 2 columns. Because it's just going to be the right part, that's going to be like the 2 small columns, and then the image I'm also going to set as before, so that it's fitting there, the div. And I'm also going to set a grid container. Because I want to have also as a grid this part and this part. So the left column and the right column is also going to be like a grid on its own. The left is going to be the grid of all the coffees, and the right is going to be the featured item. So for this, I'm going to set this as a for here div with the class ID grid container that will include both left and right parts. And if it's it should be with a hashtag and not with a dot. And this would also be like 2 columns and with some gap in between. Okay, so I have these 2, and then right here now I don't see anything because I don't have this set yet. This ID featured is empty, but when I click on this, I want this to appear here. So until now, I didn't do anything else than what we had in our project. I just have the form here. It's a bit ugly. We can fix this later, but it accepts some arguments and it sends the data correctly to the other component. And then I see these things here. And now I want to be able to click on this and show it on the featured item. So how do I do this? Remember that it's image, it's this div with this image. So I need to make some event happening when I click on the image. any ideas of how we could do this? It's an event, right? It's an event that I want to be happening when I click on the image. So it can be a click event on the image itself. So the image, when I click it, needs to be calling some function like handle click or show featured, something. Right, so when I click on the image, some method is going to be called that is going to modify this other part of my page to show the featured object. So I could call this show featured with some information. So which one will be the featured coffee? I can pass the whole object, I can pass the ID. So here, careful here in Vue, we have two ways of calling, so to setting a handler for an event. An event handler can be just the function, or we can pass information also on the function, so the arguments. Remember on the DOM, we said that we never called the function, we never used the parentheses. We just defined which function is going to be called when we click. But in Vue, we could also do it like this and pass information, and that doesn't mean that we are calling this function at this moment. It means that when the function will be called with this information. And I need to pass to this information which of my items were clicked. So the item that is clicked here, it's the one that is this one from the for loop, the coffee. I can pass the whole object, or I can pass the coffee ID and then retrieve the object from the ID as I like. But the idea is that I have on the image a click event, and then this calls some method, and the method manipulates the click data. So if I go to the methods, and I have this show featured method, that it accepts some coffee, the one that I clicked. So what do I want this to do? I want this to manipulate some data that is going to be shown in the featured section. So let's say that in the featured section, I have something that is called featured coffee name. I need to set this depending on what was clicked. Right, so somehow I need to set this featured coffee name to be equal to the coffee dot name. So to the item that was clicked, to set the item that is going to be shown on the featured section. But any time that I'm using some data here, I need to set them somehow. Either they need to be passing as props, or they need to be data that are proper data from this component itself. So let's say I create here a data that is featured, or I will call it, yes, featured. Let's say that it's an object. And so this object at the beginning is empty, but then when I click on an image, this object gets some property, right? So it gets a property that is coffee name that is equal to this coffee name of the item I have clicked. So let me see first in case I have something wrong. Type.
There's a typo on coffee, like up. You wrote coffee with one E only, featured dot coffee.
Here. Yes, this one. So this data, let me also set this here to be empty string. That will be easier. So this will be an object that one of the properties of this object is a name. And I set the name of this featured object to be equal to the coffee name. So it's some data that I'm going to be showing here on the feature section. And where do I get this data from? At the beginning, it's empty, but when I click on an image, I get the information of the object that was clicked. And then on this method, I set the featured information to this information. So load this. And then I get some image again. Featured is not defined. It needs to return an object. Yeah, the syntax is it's easier if you copy from one to the other, because it's not, if not, it's easy to make errors. So data, it's a method that returns an object. And so this is like how it should be structured in here. So return, and this is like this. And so there is a difference between props and data, right? Props are what I receive from the parent. So this is also data. I can use this data, same as I can use this data. And so I have used all coffees up here on my template. I have used it, same as I will be using any type of data. And same as I'm using featured, but just that this data is not the data of the component itself. So it's not its own reactive data. It's data that comes from somewhere else. They are modified somewhere else. And on the data are data that I'm handling for like the component's own needs. So the components need to be showing here something. And I have set this on the data section. So the featured object will be the one that it's be showing there, and it's the data declared. And let's hope that like this, it's going to work. So I have it here, and then when I click it, it shows here the name. It's going to be even better if I show the picture instead of the name. But just to make sure that we got this. Featured image URL. So the featured object actually is going to be the same as my object. It's going to have a name, it's going to have a price that I can put some initial value to, and it's going to have a URL. And when I call the show featured method, it's going to be modifying these featured object properties to make them equal to the one that it was clicked. So it should be equal to this. Let's see if there are some other. So when I click on this, I see it right here on the featured section. Let me add some more just to see it. Free and I don't even know how this is written. So right now when I load it, it shows an empty here because at the beginning the featured object is empty. Before I click on anything, the featured object is empty. I should make something to hide this if I have not clicked on anywhere. Okay, so I can modify a bit the logic there to hide this because I have a featured object that it's empty and it shows here on this section. even though I haven't clicked anywhere. But until I click somewhere, this is not going to be filled with any information. So it's empty, and the image URL is empty. That's why it shows this a bit ugly placeholder for the image. So I could improve it by making it showing only when there is something on the featured to show. If not, not show anything on this section. And then when I click on an image, the show featured method is called. It takes as an input the coffee, the object that I have clicked, and this includes all the information. It includes the ID, the name, the URL, the price, and then this information is copied to the featured object that is the own object of the component itself. So when I click, it's, well, let's say the photo is the same, but it's changing. You can see also the name. So it just modifies this with the information that has been clicked. Here you can also check this view component to see that now, for example, in the app, we have the array, and we see that we have all this information that we have stored to this all coffees array. That are the 3 items. And then if I click on the coffee view, then this data is also passed to the coffee view, and it has this information there. It's kind of loading. Probably I need to reload it. I don't want to lose the data now. So questions.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Sorry. When it was the method add coffee and it was similar to add projects, is because I've seen different things, is that having was it a new project object or a new coffee, having that variable declared, but then that's not reused anywhere else, is that necessary to the new coffee object? Is it necessary to have that? And if so, like where
This
why?
object.
Yeah, to have rather than only have ID, this name, this name, to have the different keys, is it necessary to have a new coffee object added there and then passing that through to the parent, or can you just?
You can just pass it. For example, if you copy just this directly here, it's also working. So with this event, I'm passing this object with this information, and I don't need to store it temporarily before as a new property. I don't know if you say this as a new variable. So yes, this was just to make it more visual, but yes, you can pass it directly here, all the information that you want to pass. You don't need to store it.
Thank you.
So more questions on this featured part. So from here, we got some data, which was clicked, and then we passed it to the featured, which is on the same page, but we could also pass it to a different component, right? Right now, the featured is on the same view, on the same component, and we just get which item was clicked from the click event, and then we modify some information that is shown here. So this featured image URL, it's modified. We could make these two things, so the grid and the featured item, we could also make them different components. So I could have a component for this and a component for this. And that means that the show feature now would have to emit an event to then show the information to the featured, right? Remember that events go up and props go down. So right now I didn't need to do this because they are all in the same component. But if we want to put this in different components, then we will need to again emit a different event. So let me see, we can try to see this quickly if you want, or you have some other question that we could solve before. Okay, let's see. I know that we don't have much time, like to go individually and things, but I do like to take like this, maybe even 10 minutes, we can stay some a bit more, so that before I show more things that we go, if you have doubts from the work that you have been doing this time on Christmas or before, or you have been working with the project, if you have like some more concrete doubts that you want to ask us or you want to show us your code somewhere that you're stuck, that we have at least this bit of a time now, me and Joey, to help you with this instead of just me showing more things. So let me
Anna,
see.
would it be possible for you to share the coffee
Yes.
example like in Slack or on GitHub or something? Just
Yes,
so we could
yes, I
like compare
can.
once we kind of put things together.
You have seen that the rest, it's exactly the same as that. It's just that this part of the coffee clicking is the one that is changing, but I can share this, yes.
Thank you.
I'm going to stop the recording.